Here I want to show you some differences in hind limb anatomy, and in particular the ankle region, between a couple different mammals. And I'm going to start with a placental mammal, or a tenrec, here on the left side of the screen, and contrast that with a Dasyurus, or a marsupial mammal. This is a Microgale cowani, this is a Dasyurus viverrinus, and this is an Australian marsupial, and Microgale is a tenrec from Madagascar. Perhaps you can notice right away the epipeubic bones in our marsupial. Placental mammals don't have them, but many placental mammals have bacula, or penis bones, and that's what you're looking at right there. That's a baculum, it's not an epipeubic bone, whereas both male and female marsupials will have epipeubic bones. And the other perhaps thing to mention quickly is that this hind limb is hyperextended, so you can sort of see how far forward that femur is rotated in its acetabulum, and so that's the pubic symphysis right there. These are the ilia stretching anteriorly in the animal, whereas this is a somewhat more lifelike articulation in terms of the position of the femur relative to the pelvis. Okay, so let's look for a moment at this distal part of the hind limb in our tenrec. You can see perhaps right away that fibula is fused with the tibia about halfway down its shaft. And it's still evident the fibula still has an articulation in the ankle itself. So there you can see the tibial side of the articulation, which is most of it. But here, that's all distal fibula. And that gives you an idea of what that talofibular articulation looks like in a placental mammal. Here's the astragalus. That's that first tarsal bone that connects mostly to the tibia, a little bit also to the fibula as well. Just ventral or plantar to the astragalus is the calcaneus, sometimes called calcaneum, same bone. And it has this very prominent process that holds the triceps surae, the three calf muscles, the two gastrocnemius and the soleus in the middle. A marsupial has those as well, but it does not have that fusion with the tibia and fibula. So here you can see an unfused fibula throughout the length of that hind limb. And the astragalus looks pretty different in the marsupial as well. So it has a somewhat less obvious trochlea, right? So that's has a generally more smooth shape compared to this slight trochlea you see in the tenrec. And the other bones in the marsupial, I mentioned the calcaneus already. That's roughly similar in terms of its holding or attachment site for the triceps surae. You can see a really prominent process on this fifth metatarsal that would connect muscles or provide an attachment site for muscles running between this part of the forefoot and that fifth metatarsal. A similar structure you can see in the tenrec, at least on that fifth metatarsal, but check out that that perineal process on the distal part of the calcaneus in the tenrec. That's more or less absent in our marsupial. So the bones distal to those first two tarsals, so calcaneus there, astragalus here. The astragalus articulates with a bone called the navicular, which you can see here. All of that is the navicular bone. Here's the calcaneus, and that articulates with the bone called the cuboid. And distal to at least to the navicular, are three bones called the cuneiforms. There's one right there, there, and there. And those similar bones in a roughly comparable arrangement are also present in the tenrec. So there's our astragalus, there's our calcaneus. The astragalus articulates in the navicular right there. The calcaneus articulates in the cuboid, or with the cuboid right there. And then distal to our navicular, we have our three cuneiforms right there, there, and there. And distal to the cuneiforms are, of course, our metatarsals. That's for digit 1, metatarsal 1, metatarsal 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you can orient yourselves in the foot, remembering that the astragalus articulation with the navicular is medial. That's going to be on the side towards digit 1, whereas the calcaneus and any perineal process it might have, that's lateral. that's going to be towards digit 5. So digit 5 is on this side, digit 1 is on this side. And of course, farther down, we have our proximal phalanges, our intermediate phalanges, and our distal phalanges that contribute to the claws. And that's also true on our Dasyurus. So the metatarsals, proximal, intermediate, distal phalanges. And you see just how reduced that digit 1 is in the marsupial. And it's not quite as reduced in digit 1 in the tenrec. It's a bit reduced. That's digit 1 on the Astragalus side. And digit 5 is also slightly reduced, but not as much as what you see in digit 1 in the marsupial. And then very briefly, I thought I'd point out what you can just make out here in this Dasyurus, the continuous lower ankle joint facet. This is a derived feature in our Australadelphian marsupials. So the sustentacular and astragular facet on the calcaneus is more or less one continuous joint surface, and you can just make it out right there. Whereas if you look in the tenrec, the astragalus and calcaneus are pretty tightly connected here, so you don't really see it, at least not until I show you the segmented out version. But you can kind of get an idea that that joint surface for the astragalus is separate from the joint surface, the sustentacular joint surface on this part of the calcaneum. And this is what you generally see in mammals. This continuous lower ankle joint surface in Australodelphian marsupials is pretty rare. You just see it in Dromaeosaurus in South America and all of the Australian and oceanic marsupials.